Hi everyone, today I'm talking to you about 10 mistakes that every smartphone filmmaker makes. And I know about these mistakes because these are ones that I've made myself. So this should be a really interesting video for those of you and helpful if you're just starting out with smartphone filmmaking and even for those who are a bit more experienced. Just a quick thank you to everyone so far who's donated to my Buy Me a Coffee page. I really appreciate that support, it means a lot, and I'll be able to keep making these videos and improving them as well. And I've got an exciting thing coming up later on in the year thanks to those donations, so thank you, and the link for that Buy Me a Coffee page is down below. So let's get into it. The first mistake I see a lot of smartphone filmmakers make is not using a professional smartphone filmmaking app. Now with your native app, for me on my iPhone 8 for example, I can get a little bit of control on the exposure and a little bit of control on the focus, but that's it, and it's not even that reliable. So you really need to get something like Filmic Pro, which is what I shoot with here on my YouTube videos all the time. All my short films are shot with Filmic Pro. The reason being is when I started out, I thought I just need to get something that can give me more control, and this is exactly that. So it really is worth splashing out £15 on getting a professional smartphone filmmaking app. It's a little bit daunting at first of all the features that it has, but use channels like mine with my Filmic Pro tutorials that I have to learn the basics and learn the advanced parts of it as well, and you'll be flying before you know it, and you'll make really great professional films with ultimate amount of controls you can get with the app. Mistake number 2 that a lot of people make is not locking their white balance. I know this because I've done it myself, and it's a really annoying thing to do because when you get into post-production, you really can't correct it at all. It's just something that's going to be there in your film. So if you go to white balance here on Filmic Pro, you'll see here in blue AWB. That's automatic white balance. So as we move the camera, you'll see that dot in the middle. That starts moving around, and that's causing a different color shift, as you can see on the image. Now you don't want that because you can't fix that in post-production, so make sure you lock it by pressing on AWB, and that's now white balance locked. It's in red. So now it's going to be nice consistent white balance, as you can see from outside of the screen here, and you're going to get a much more consistent image. So lock your white balance. A big mistake I see with people who are just starting out with smartphone filmmaking is mixing up your frames per second and your shutter speeds to a point where your footage will just look really jittery and not professional at all, and like quite amateur that you'd film, a family video kind of thing. So why is frames per second and shutter speed so important? Well, if you match them correctly, you're going to get motion blur. So why is motion blur so important? Well, when you're looking at things through your own eyes, if something's moving fast enough, you will see motion blur. If you've got the shutter speeds mixed up, and not where they should be, you're not going to get that motion blur, and it's going to look quite jittery like a home video someone would film with their family. So I want to do something with you right now. Get your hand, put it in front of your face, and just move your hand really quick. That kind of blur that you're seeing with your hand is the motion blur you need with your frames per second and matching that with shutter speed. So you need to double your frames per second into the shutter speed, have 24 frames per second, lock that in with your app, i.e. Filmic Pro, get 1/48 shutter speed, and then when you have those locked in together, you're going to get that motion blur. If you don't do that kind of 180 rule of doubling your frames per second into your shutter speed, you're not going to get that motion blur. It's going to look jittery, really unprofessional, and we don't want that, especially when we have apps like this, Filmic Pro. One mistake people often make when they're starting out is not buying ND filters. I know this because I stupidly didn't make ND filters at the top of my list of things that I need for smartphone filmmaking. ND filters are essentially sunglasses for your phone, so when you put your ND filter over your lens, you're going to stop a certain amount of light from getting into that small sensor of your phone. That way you're able to control your shutter speed and your frames per second. We know that that's important because you get the motion blur that we talked about, and you're also able to control the highlights in the background as well. So to see how we do that, let's go to Rob, who's out in the field now. So let's take a look now at how this image is going to look once we put the ND filter on and look at the skies in particular. How much better does that look now? You can see all the detail in the clouds, the coloration changes in the sky as we're hitting golden now. It looks beautiful. It's so much better when you have an ND filter on, and it stops it from looking amateur. As I got further on with my filmmaking career, you'll see in my films, you'll see that the skies are way better exposed, and it just looks so much more professional. So make sure you look after your highlights. One mistake that I made when I was making my first short film, Blue, was having pretty shaky audio. Now I made this short film in my hallway, so there was reflections of sound everywhere, bouncing all over the place. We had a wooden floor, plain white walls. The sound was horrible. It was really bad. So if I'd known what that was going to be like, I would have put things like rugs on the floor, towels around where you couldn't see it so that it soaked up the sound. Just because you're making a smartphone film, and especially when you're starting out, don't accept subpar audio. People can see an image and watch a film where the image isn't that great, but they can't listen to a film that isn't that great because it's going to hurt the ears. It's going to be really annoying to listen to, and they're going to switch off that film straight away. So think about things like if you can't get good audio because you don't have the mics, have a silent film where you don't need to have good audio. Go to places like freesound.org where you can get ambient sounds, put that over. Don't forget your Foley as well, so getting those sound effects of the doors clicking as they're closing, that kind of thing, putting shoes on, steps, that kind of thing. Really take the time to go into your audio and make sure that your smartphone film sounds good as well as looks good. These days there's mics that are pretty good for really cheap prices, so there really is no excuse for making a short film that has really crappy sound when there's such great options available. If you want to learn more about microphones and how to get a good sound for your smartphone films, check out the link right here at the end of the video. Now, an interesting mistake that people make is thinking that you need smartphone lenses for your films. Now, they certainly add something, but you don't need them. We've got things like a macro lens, which can make things look really close up and clear. You've got a fisheye lens as well, which can give you a really interesting and unique perspective, perhaps that of a peephole in a door, that kind of thing. And you've got the larger wide-angle lens as well, which can give you a much wider aspect ratio on your film for more establishing shots and things like that. Now, my favourite lens is the Moondog Labs anamorphic lens, so I'm a bit of a hypocrite here, but I don't think you need to get a smartphone lens. Learn the basics first, learn about your camera angles, learn how your phone works, learn about your Filmic Pro app or whatever app you've bought, and get good at that. You don't need external lenses. It's really a style choice in what you're filming. So once you get really good at what you're doing, then start thinking about lenses. Or was it lens? A really interesting mistake that I see even the more experienced smartphone filmmakers make is treating the smartphone camera like a second-rate camera. You don't need to do that at all. For example, if you use Filmic Pro's grid guide, you can get nice composition so that your shots can be looking nice and lined up. Learn about your rule of thirds, that kind of thing, because these are things that aren't camera related. It's all about the user. It's not about the camera that's being used, it's about the person using the camera. So change that mindset. Use that grid guide that you get with Filmic Pro to learn about your framing composition. There are really established directors who have made films, really successful films, on a smartphone. Sean Baker made Tangerine, which is a pretty well-known film, on an iPhone 5S, and he said at the end of the screening at a Sundance Film Festival, when it came up on the credits as shot on iPhone, the whole audience, he said there was an audible gasp. So even people who are really experienced filmmakers had no idea that this film was shot on an iPhone 5S. They loved it. It was all about the story. So if you're telling a good story, you're filming it well, it looks great, you shot it well, that's the main thing. And the average Joe isn't going to care what it's shot on if they got a good film in front of them. They're just not. You've also got High Flying Bird by Steven Soderbergh, which is shot on an iPhone 8, which is what I'm filming this YouTube video with, which just blows my mind. Now, obviously they do have like lighting rigs, all this kind of stuff, color grading, but you get that on any film anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. Steven Soderbergh also made Unsane, which is a brilliant smartphone film, which I highly suggest you check out. That was on an iPhone 7 Plus, I believe. So he's made 2 feature films on a smartphone, which tells you everything. Stop treating your smartphone like a second-rate camera, change that mindset, and start making films that are pretty spectacular. A mistake that people of all levels of experience make with smartphone filmmaking is not learning all the limitations of a smartphone, because you need to know what they are so you can work with them instead of wondering why certain things aren't quite looking right. For example, with a smartphone, you've got a very tiny sensor on that. Even on the 12 Pro Max, it's not amazing at low light. It's really good, but it's not amazing at low light. So you need to understand what lighting conditions work well with a smartphone, when you need to pump more light in so you can keep your ISO levels down, which will give you less noise, all that kind of thing. Also understand that a shadow depth of field is something that's quite hard to achieve on a smartphone. You're going to have things very close to the lens to make it feel like it's a shallow depth of field, although there are external lenses that you can buy now to help you with that. So really learn about the limitations of a smartphone, which aren't that many these days, so you can work with them rather than against them and struggling. The penultimate mistake that people make in smartphone filmmaking is believing that because you're shooting on a smartphone, that's enough to make your film stand out. It's not. You still got to make a really great story for your film. As I mentioned before, you can shoot on a film, you can have it looking amazing, get your composition right, the sound can be great, the lighting can be great, but if the story's boring, we'll still switch off after 5 minutes. You just need to make sure that you've got a great story. That's the key thing. Don't think that because you're shooting on a smartphone, that will make your film stand out alone. It has to be a good film overall. And look at the standard of films that aren't shot on a smartphone and aim for those. So make sure your story is king, and the fact that you're filming on a smartphone is nothing really. You're just treating it like a normal camera. So the last mistake that I see people make with smartphone filmmaking is not utilising the fact that they're filming on a smartphone. Now the fact that this is so slim, so skinny, and the shape of it, you can fit into places that you just couldn't fit a DSLR camera. So make sure you're utilising and making the most of the fact that you're using quite a unique camera really. I mean, I put this in a fridge when I had a really jam-packed fridge and I couldn't take stuff out, so make sure that I could get a nice unique shot for a short film that I made. I put it in cupboards, little side drawers next to the oven that you wouldn't be able to fit a DSLR camera in any day of the week. And I put it in bin bags as well to create really cool, unique shots as well. So utilize the shape of this, make sure that you use this to your advantage rather than thinking it's a disadvantage. A bonus tip, how good am I to you guys? The bonus tip is to clean the lens of your phone before you have a take. Now, just get your jumper, whatever you got, just give it a quick little scrub, and you can check to make sure it's nice and clear. Sometimes you get a bit of a muggy kind of shot because these have been in our pockets, you're getting dust all over them, that kind of thing. If you've got a proper cleaning cloth, obviously that's better, but just make sure you give your lens a little clean. Well guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video and it's been really helpful for you. If you're just starting out, welcome to the club of smartphone filmmaking, and if you're more experienced, I hope you've learned a couple of things from this as well. If you have enjoyed this, let me know what you enjoyed about it and what you learned in the comments down below. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye bye.